Senator from Anderson, Senator Cash, what purpose do you rise?
See if the senator would yield for a few questions.
Senator, yield for a few questions.
Senator, my friend
Senator
from Anderson.
Yes, sir.
Senator, I'll try to get through this as quickly as possible.
Sure.
In section 4453-2080 is a section about the form that's got to be filled out by the physician.
I'm sorry, Senator, I'm getting to it.
Well, it's a simple question. The way I read it, I just want to make sure that from what I can tell, the physician would have to fill one of these forms out for each patient each year.
Correct.
It's an annual certificate. So after a year, you've got to go back to the doctor, if you haven't been, and get another certificate. Is that a yes or no?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It's
That's all I need to know there.
Yes.
All right. 4453-2100.
Okay.
Senator, I think there are some valid concerns among people who oppose this bill about not those who, like Ms. Richardson, are in her circumstances, but people who will try to use this as a loophole to get marijuana products, okay? I mean, I think that's a valid concern. Now, what every senator in here is trying to figure out, and at the end of the day, it's going to affect their vote is, you know, does the compassionate side here of helping people like Ms. Richardson, how does that weigh out with the public safety aspect if you believe that it's going to lead to more drug addiction and abuse and so on and so forth? So I'm not going to go down either side of that argument. I don't think that people who vote against this lack compassion. I don't think that people who support this are against law enforcement, okay? I just discount both of those arguments if you're just going to take them to the extreme. People are trying to balance this out in their mind, and that's why we're going to have a lot of amendments so people can try to improve this as the way they see fit. But
just to comment on that, and I encourage that. And I said from the very first day that I was in here, I wanted to know what my colleagues thought about this. I wanted to pick this apart and to make it the best bill possible. And from some of the amendments that I've seen drafted and being put on the desk, that's exactly what's occurring here. And I appreciate this effort, Senator from Anderson.
Sure. So under point 4, let's talk about PTSD, because I do think there's a valid concern here that someone can go to the physician and say, well, I've got PTSD. I would like to get a card. And in the PTSD section, allows for a card if you've been in an active combat zone, a victim of a violent or sexual crime, or first responder, although that gets preempted, you know, for those who are in public safety. But there's also a phrase in there that says includes this, but it's not limited to this. And so, Senator, can you understand there's a concern among people that people who just want to use cannabis products are going to maybe go to a physician and say, well, I've had a traumatic experience. I was in a car accident. Whatever experience they want to name is being the trauma. If they go to a physician who's a little bit lax on the way they write their certificates or do their investigations, they're going to walk out with a certificate for cannabis products. Do you understand that concern?
I do, and in subcommittee and in full committee, in regard to 2 of the qualifying conditions, there were concerns expressed by some members that they may be somewhat subjective in nature, one being PTSD, the other being chronic pain. And in regard to chronic pain, the way I attempted to get at that was saying that there had to be an affirmative, objective diagnosis by the physician as to the etiology of that pain. So in other words, it had to be tied to an observable and diagnosed underlying condition. And I tried to do the same thing in regard to PTSD. I tried to flesh it out by making it so that it wasn't enough simply to go in and say, I've been through a harrowing experience, I'm experiencing flashbacks. I've tried to craft it in a way that would, and in fact, we've charged the department with, to quote from the section you're referring to, providing guidelines for the types of evidence accepted to confirm that an applicant experienced one or more traumatic events. Acceptable evidence must include, okay, that's a baseline, but is not limited to proof of military service in an active combat zone, that the person was the victim of a violent or sexual crime, or that the person was a first responder. So in some sense, what I've done here, or what we've done here, or what the committee's done here, is recognize that there is a subjectivity to the PTSD diagnosis, charge the department with developing regs that would assist a physician in trying to document, as it were, the underlying condition that underlying event that gave rise to the PTSD. I'm open to other ways of doing it. This was my best shot at it. If there are other ideas in this body about how we can tie it objectively to an event that actually happened in a way that's somewhat respectful of the patient, I'm open to it.
Thank you, Senator. I mean, I raise that because there might be someone out here who could bring forth an idea. I've tried to think about it. I have not come up with something better, but I do see there's a valid concern here with the PTSD. Now, I wanted to ask you a question going to Section 4453, 2130.
Yes, sir.
Which is about getting an ID card.
Right.
Senator, I'm not looking for a long answer here, but I do want to raise the point and get a brief response of, so if someone has a past history of drug use, even to the point of selling drugs, do you have any caution there about them being allowed to go in and get a card? Then maybe they've got PTSD.
I guess my answer would be no, I don't, because the requirement of the physician diagnosis is so exhaustive. The penalties for violating it are a felony, and so I take comfort in that. But I understand your argument is that if a patient has a past history of illegal use of a substance, that perhaps you can draw an inference that they might be going through this process. But I would make this point. Those individuals who want to consume marijuana recreationally or illegally, they're doing it now. And they can continue to do it now much more cheaply than it would cost them if they try to get medical cannabis, because medical cannabis is going to be much more expensive because of the quality controls we're building in. And the violation for possessing it illegally is in many cases a misdemeanor if you do it illegally, but a felony if you try to abuse the medical cannabis process. So I don't think and assuming this is a rational actor out there, if they're looking at the cost of getting the marijuana to get themselves high, or if they're looking at the penalties and the criminal penalty of getting caught, they're not going to go through a medical cannabis program and pay more for medical cannabis and risk committing a felony than they are right now buying it illegally and risking committing a misdemeanor.
Senator, I want to ask you a question at Section 4453, 2200. And this also, let me try to articulate the question, because it also takes into account some phrasing in Section 2210, and then and the basic question I'm trying to get at here in reading these sections is, from your perspective and what you've tried to write here, how much cannabis product could someone actually have on hand? And what I mean by that is, the law allows you to go and get a 14-day supply of cannabis products every 14 days, right?
Right.
So let's say you go and you get 10 bags of gummy bears, but you only use 2 bags. So now you've got 8 bags left over, but after 14 days, you go back and you get 10 more bags, and you only use 2 bags. And you see what I'm saying? The product begins to accumulate. And so in looking at the language here, I'm wanting to know what you think it means, because in 2210A, you're not subject to arrest as long as you do not possess more than the allowable amount of cannabis products. But if I'm buying what's allowed every 14 days, and you could argue I don't possess more than the allowable amount, I bought what I could buy every 14 days, even though I now have maybe a 2-month supply built up because I haven't used it all. And at point E, we get back to the same question. A cardholder is presumed to be lawfully in possession of cannabis products if the cardholder possesses an amount of cannabis products that does not exceed an allowable amount of cannabis products. And so the question becomes, if you've got, through not using it all, a bunch on hand, are you in violation of the law?
Yes, you are, because under the definitional section in 44-53-2010, which in 1A, which defines what allowable amount of cannabis is, it talks about specific restrictions in regard to the milligrams of the substance that you can have, depending upon the mode of consumption. And so if you've got in your possession at any one time an amount that's in excess of what is permitted during a 2-week window, you are in violation of this section, because you are now in possession of a disallowable or non-allowable amount of cannabis. I mean, the fact that you legally possessed it within that 2-week period initially, the fact that you didn't use all of it and allowed it to accumulate, you're going to get yourself into a position where you're beyond those 2-week thresholds and you're in violation of this law. And if that's not clear, I mean, we can put up an amendment to make that clear, because it is certainly not the intent to say to a patient, okay, you're authorized to get up to a 2-week supply here, but feel free to kind of stow away whatever you want.
Okay, I understand your thinking, and it might need a little wordsmithing there, because I also think, on the other hand, if someone is coming towards the end of their 2-week period, and they've still got a little bit on hand, when they go to the whatever we're calling it now, the pharmacy, and buy another 2-week supply, for a brief period of time there, they're going to be probably over the allowable amount, because they've got the entire 2-week supply plus the little bit that was left over before they went. So there might have to be some wordsmithing
that's
there.
fair. Maybe some cleanup language to account for both instances. I mean, one, to make clear that the accumulation of an amount beyond the 2-week allowance is not going to be permitted, but also maybe creating some safe harbor to protect the unwitting violation by some who weren't out of their prescription or their authorization when they went back and got another 2 weeks. That's a fair point.
All right, Senator, it's section 4453, 2350.
Yes, sir.
This gets into the part of the bill where now the local government has to decide, or the department has to decide who's going to get these licenses to operate a cultivation center, a processing center, et cetera.
Correct.
And point 2A, I just don't know what this means when you say you're going to have a scoring system, and the first thing on the scoring system says the preference of the local government. So what does that mean in your thinking? Some of these other things are very clear to me. That's not clear at all. I mean, the local government gets to have a preference in the scoring system. Well, what kind of preference? What does it even mean?
Well, it relates back to what's said earlier, is in cases in which more applicants apply than are allowed by the local government. I guess this is an attempt to bring into the decision-making process by DHEC what the wishes of a local community are as expressed by that local government. And so in cases where there's already maybe one pharmacy or two pharmacies, it may be a relevant factor for DHEC to consider the fact that the local government doesn't think they need to have 3 pharmacies. I guess it's an attempt to incorporate into the selection process what local governments would like their communities to look like. I'm trying to make that part of the decision-making process.
I understand, Senator. I just don't know if we've arrived at it there, because in point number 2, you're talking about in cases in which more applicants apply than are allowed by the local government. the numerical system must include analysis of the preference of the local government. So the local government doesn't get to look at 5 applications for 2 dispensaries, so to speak, and say, well, I know that person, so
No, I don't
we're
think
going to give them
yeah.
a bonus point. I mean,
Yeah,
I'm not sure what it means.
Yeah, no,
That's all I'm saying.
the intent is not in regard to the preference of the local government in regard to competing applicants, as I read it. The intent is whether or not there are more than one establishments in the municipality or the local government, do they want to have multiple ones? So I view it being more of a concern about the aggregate number of these dispensary outlets or pharmacy outlets, whatever it ends up being. But I'm happy to look at that, and if that needs to be cleaned up. But that was the intent there, not to have the local government weigh in and say, we like person X or not person Z.
I follow you, Senator. We maybe can get together and look at that language because...
And while we're talking about Senator from Anderson, I think it's useful to have this discussion as well because it's going to have to take place. What degree of control do we want local governments to have through their land use regulations? The way that it's phrased right now in this bill is that a local government through its police powers can decide which areas within their jurisdiction they want these sorts of establishments or pharmacies to be. I know there's going to be some amendments being put on the desk that will say that if a municipality wants to, it can pass zoning laws which completely prohibits any dispensing pharmacy at all. So I just want to presage that debate that I know is coming while we've touched upon the local government language.
All right. I'm almost through here, Senator, but in this same section, point number 15, if you could go there.
Yes, sir.
It says at any time the department may promulgate regulations allowing additional categories of medical cannabis establishments to operate.
I'm sorry, what section again is that, Senator? I'm sorry.
Well, it's 24. It's the same section. It's just point number 15.
2350? That's section 2350?
Well, it's point number B. It comes after point number 15. 2350, point B, capital B.
Okay, let me get to B. Okay, I'm there now.
It says the department can develop regulations allowing additional categories of medical cannabis establishments. I mean, what the bill deals with right now is the cultivator, the processor, the dispenser. I know those 3, unless I'm forgetting one. But
yeah,
have you got
growers, processors, dispensers, transporters, and independent lab analysis. Those are the 5.
Okay, so, I mean, you're familiar with a lot of the state laws. Are there other kinds of medical establishments that you are thinking of? Or why would we, in such a detailed law, want to just give the department carte blanche to develop a new kind of medical cannabis establishment? I'm not sure this body would want to do that.
Okay, I take your point, but I can give you my thought process here.
Okay.
Was that once something moves from the theoretical, which is here, and moves to the reality and in practice and what's happening out there, this attempted to give the department some latitude in the event the way markets are operating out there didn't fall strictly within the 5 categories that we've delineated. But I take your point. Your point is if it's a material thing in terms of the type of medical cannabis establishments we want to have, that ought to be something that if it's not working the way that it ought, perhaps the remedy is back here in the General Assembly, not through department changing it through reg. My thought process was it'd be less cumbersome if we could simply see how it works in practice and see whether or not the model that we contemplated in this legislation worked. And to the extent that there were adjustments that needed to be made, it could be more effectively done through the department. But I take your point. I mean, we can debate whether or not that's something the General Assembly should do and not an agency.
All right, my last question here is section 4453, 2370. This is about the real-time seed-to-sale tracking system.
Yes, sir.
I'm not looking for an exhaustive explanation of that because that's going to be an exhaustive system. I was a computer programmer in a previous lifetime, and I wouldn't want to be the one having to develop this system. But are we actually saying that every seed or at least every single plant is somehow accounted for in this process from the time that seed gets put in the ground? It grew, it didn't grow. We have a plant, we don't have a plant, the plant went here, and we can track that plant all the way to a dispensary?
And I understand, and I saw this in practice. It is barcoded in such a way that it is tracked in that manner. And all I can say is, again, we've had technology, innovations, bright minds stepping in to try to go ahead and meet this particular need in states that have legalized it for medical. And so you've seen some very sophisticated computer tracking systems. And so, I mean, I'm going to get way out of my depth here quickly.
Well, all I really mean simply is, are we actually talking about, just so we know, this system tracks a single seed or it tracks a single plant? It's that.
It is.
It is that thorough.
It is that thorough. It is quite literally a seed to sale tracking program.
That's what I wanted to know. I'm not asking you to explain the system. Thank you.
Thank you.